the name of the program is the way to go. I invite you to join me each week at this time as we explore places to go and things to do. What we're exploring today is contemporary public art. It's art that is all around us. Sometimes we don't see it. Sometimes it's invisible. And my guest today is Susan Hoeltzel, who is the director of the Lehman College Art Gallery, where there is a great exhibit, and we'll learn all about it today. Susan, welcome to the program, and let's talk about public art. Is it something that is new? There certainly seems to be more interest in it than there ever was before.
I think the answer to that is yes and no. There's always been art that's been made and put in public places like the town park, those figures of generals on horseback, and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
However, I think there's been a great proliferation in contemporary art in public places due to the funding of Percent for Art programs throughout the country.
What are those?
They're a program where a percentage of the construction costs for a new building will be set aside for art, and they exist on the federal level. The GSA sponsors art.
Is it required?
The city.
Is it required when they're putting up a building to put art?
It is in New York City if you're doing it on city property and it's done through a city agency. Those get Department of Cultural Affairs Percent for Art money. If you're building a new school in the Bronx, then the Bronx has had an extreme classroom shortage, and there are a number of new schools that are being built there. Those come with Percent for Art projects. If you're putting in a new fire station, if you're putting in a sanitation station, they are a public building in New York City, and they come with 1% of that funding for art.
And does the art relate specifically to the building, a fire station, a school? Is it something that has to relate? Is it a fireman in a Dalmatian?
The art is developed through a panel process, and the people who are a part of that fire station are involved with that selection of the artist, and nearly always the art relates to the function of the site. It doesn't necessarily mean there's going to be a fireman with a Dalmatian outside. It may be abstract. As a matter of fact, we have a police station a fire station in the Bronx that's just gotten a public art piece by David Saunders, and essentially it's a logo-like shape on the side of the building.
So public art is not necessarily a three-dimensional art. It's not necessarily sculpture. It could be decoration of the side of a building or a sidewalk, I assume.
Yeah, it really has changed radically. I think that's the part of public art that has changed radically. It could be an individual sculptor sitting in a plaza, but rarely anymore is it that. It's usually integrated either into the building design or into the whole urban design. It could be the plaza. There was an interesting article in the New York Times in August about a new waste plant that had been developed in the city of Phoenix, and artists were selected not to work with the architects in this instance, but to select the design team and the architects and to develop an idea for this building, which is very much about education.
Good.
So it's the whole building itself is really the art collaboration in this instance.
No, I see art wherever I go. I see it in throughout Westchester. I see it in Bronx. I see it in Manhattan, in all the boroughs. It's everywhere if you're aware of it. But in a lot of cases, I suppose to the public it's invisible because we ride past it and never think about it twice. This exhibit that you've put together, is that trying to raise the consciousness about public art?
Absolutely. I think the Bronx has a great new resource in these art projects that are going in now, but there are many, many sculptures that have been in parks for years. So what we're trying to do is, with our catalog for this exhibition, look with Sally Webster's essay at those historical monuments from the 19th century all the way through the WPA period, those murals in the post office on the concourse by Ben Shawn and his wife Bernarda Bryson. All of those pieces will be looked at in one essay, and the second essay, which is the one I'm doing, will look at the contemporary projects. And the idea is also to produce, over the next year, teacher materials will go into the schools so that classes can look at these projects in the post office, in their own school, and relate those things to the curriculum. A lot of them are about particular issues of the neighborhood because the artists have selected visual images to work with that have to do with the history of the neighborhood. So, I mean, they're great research projects for kids, but they also are about working with materials, and so there are all sorts of art projects
Now,
that are related.
this is not just an exhibit. It runs through December 15th.
Yes.
And this is not just an exhibit that is going to be at the Lehman College Art Gallery, because you've arranged to have two other institutions
Right.
participate.
Right.
How did that happen, and what's involved?
About a year ago, I realized the Bronx Museum was doing a WPA era show. They're highlighting some of the murals from the Health and Hospitals collection. And while it's not the same era that we're working with the contemporary pieces, I thought it would be a nice collaboration. And so I went and spoke to them, and we're doing panels together, artist panels, looking at the 1930s when so much public art was produced, and looking at today. We're doing bus tours of the Bronx to go around to these sites. We'll be taking people to see the post office on the concourse, to see the Ben Shahn and Bernardo Bryson piece, to see Houston La's piece in PS7, so that it'll be a mix of the contemporary and the historical pieces.
But there's a third institution that's also involved, and it's not in the Bronx.
Right. We're also, in the middle of the year, we discovered that Baruch was also looking at contemporary art projects, and we wanted to work with them as well. And so we set up an arrangement with them so that they're a part of this panel discussion series. The first actually begins at City Hall, where Health and Hospitals has its headquarters, and then there'll be one at the Bronx Museum, one at Baruch College, and then one at Lehman.
But the exhibit itself is only at Lehman College. Is the Bronx Museum and Baruch also doing something?
They're also doing something. The exhibit at the Bronx Museum is on right now, and it looks at public art from the Health and Hospitals collection from the 1930s. And Baruch is opening theirs very soon, and theirs will be looking also at contemporary sites, but looking at how the artist's studies relate to the actual works once they're executed. So it's a slightly different take on the contemporary art. We're looking at the Bronx as a microcosm. We have this borough. It's compared to the whole city, a defined, smaller place, and we're looking at how these new resources are impacting this community. And it's a little soon to say because these things are just going in right now.
Now, actually, how do you define public art? Is it anything that's in the street?
No. For the purposes of this exhibition, it's not. We have many things that are on the street that are within the range of art that are outside the exhibition. The works that we're looking at for this exhibit are those things which are sponsored by public agencies and paid for with public money, or things that are paid for privately and in very public places. We're not considering corporate collections of art. But John Ahern and Rigoberto Torres have been producing cast busts of people from the Bronx for the last over 10 years. And they've been on the sides of buildings in the South Bronx for since 1982 is the earliest. And those were made with some public money, but the later pieces they did were paid for with their own money, but they're in very public places.
Which brings us to the subject of graffiti. Graffiti is a controversial subject, and yet some graffiti, as we see in the garage at the White Plains Library, there's a wall that's covered with graffiti, but it's not graffiti because obviously it's been commissioned. So graffiti that then becomes, the graffiti type art that then becomes commissioned is then public art, isn't it?
Well, I think when something goes through a process where a number of people consider it and it comes into the public rather than a private exercise, an unauthorized exercise, it's a very different situation. The public art projects that we've been discussing go through community boards, they go through the Department of Cultural Affairs, they go through the Art Commission's approval, they start with community groups meetings, so that at all these levels they involve the people who are with the agency that's commissioning the work, like the schools would be involved if it's a project in a school. So you've gone through many, many people who
It's a formal formalized process. Then,
it's a
actually.
collective. It's a collective event rather than an individual's expression. And I think the difficulty with art in public places, it's unauthorized, is the common good and the individual are not in a good thing. However, I must admit that, and as you have pointed out, many books have been written on the subject of graffiti. To not acknowledge what graffiti in the Bronx has contributed to contemporary art would also be an oversight. I think the energy that has come out of a lot of that unauthorized art, as well as its strategies for placing it publicly, have really had a strong impact on contemporary art downtown in the 1980s. There are a number of artists who have worked actually through a very famous gallery, which is no longer in the South Bronx, Fashion Moda, and worked street artists and those with art school backgrounds have worked together. And I think in the early 80s, there was a lot of infusion of some of the ideas from that street art feeding into contemporary art, which is, in the major museums now.
And yet some graffiti artists, or street artists, as you call them, have gone, quote, legitimate. Keith Haring certainly is an example of that, and went from putting up on his distinctive type of art on the walls to being a world-famous and acclaimed artist. And so there is a transition. Nobody's saying that it's not good. It's just a question of how and where, I suppose.
Yes.
What happens when someone comes to see this exhibit of yours through December 15th at Lehman College? First of all, where is it located? It's on the Lehman College campus?
Yes, it's in a very unusual building. We're very fortunate to have a building designed by Marcel Breuer, a major international architect. And it's in that building on the Lehman campus, which is in the northern part of the Bronx.
Mm-hmm. On Bedford
Park Boulevard.
Right. And so it's on the campus. And if one comes and sees this exhibit, what is there? What is the exhibit like?
What we have in the gallery is not the actual projects because we can't bring in whole mural walls.
Right.
And a good bit of this is in progress right now. So it's kind of a sneak preview of what will be on the streets of the Bronx. But what we will have will be the preparatory drawings. We will have models and maquettes. We will have some of the actual works when they've been made as multiples. For instance, Martin Wong's street signs for the hearing impaired, which are found at St. Joseph's School for the Deaf in the Bronx and other campuses for of deaf schools.
So it's like an introduction to what's going to happen.
Yeah.
And where does one go without going to the gallery to see public art? Can you point out some outstanding and interesting places in the Bronx and elsewhere? I see things everywhere. And maybe some of the things that I keep in mind are the things that are corporate type of things. But you're talking about things that are community or government or certainly privately funded, I suppose.
Yeah.
So point out some interesting ones. Where can I go by myself? Because this program is about places to go and things to do.
In the Bronx, there are some wonderful outdoor sites. The John Ahern and Rigoberto Torres wall pieces, 170th and Walton, is one location.
It's on the side of a building?
It's on the side of the building, and it's quite high up, and you can see it from several blocks away. It's a grouping of, it's called Back to School, and it shows different neighborhood people, parents, children, on that first day of school. Mm-hmm. Down the street, there is the post office on the Grand Concourse.
On
It's like 149th.
49th Street. Is that in the building itself?
It's in the building itself. Murals are generally inside, though not always.
Mm-hmm.
Throughout the Bronx, there are a number of public murals that are done by a group called City Arts that are on the side of buildings outside. Mm-hmm. They are not long-term permanent because those things can only last as long as the paint, which is 25 years unless if they're repainted. But those are turned over a little bit more often. The back of the Longwood Center on Longwood Avenue has a huge mural by Anne Finkelstein. And there is a park on Fox Street with Raphael Ferrer's first major monumental piece. That's an entry to a small community park.
How do you find out about them? Do you have people who are aware, or do you drive around, or is there a listing that appears? Has someone done and looked at all of it?
This is the difficult part. And all of the contemporary pieces are cataloged with the Department of Cultural Affairs if they are generated by the Cultural Affairs Department. Mm-hmm. However, there are all these other agencies who are producing public art that are not required to submit them to the Art Commission because they're doing it independently. For instance, the Port Authority, the Transit Authority, the State Dormitory Authority of New York, which builds all those city university campuses, each of those decided this was a good idea to follow the percent per art procedures mm-hmm. and to implement the same plan, but they're not legally obligated to do that, and they have a different procedure for filing them. So they're not all in one place. You have to really go from agency to agency, and then there are all these small agencies. The Bronx Council commissions work. The department, DCA, has other programs that run through the community development
So putting it all
program.
together is a big research project.
Together, and one is always nervous about overlooking something obvious, and so we're still finding work. Actually,
would you say that public art is a controversial subject?
It has been very frequently.
Why?
Because, and it usually is involved with the imagery.
Explain that a little bit. I don't know what you mean when you say it's the imagery.
When you're looking at art and it's abstract, unless you put it in the shortest distance between 2 points and obstruct someone's pathway, it's probably not going to generate the kind of controversy that is generated when that art has a specific identifiable content. It depicts something particular. And because we live in a very diverse culture, it's very difficult to come up with something that someone doesn't find objectionable.
So does that happen? Something goes up and people hate it, and then it has to be taken down?
Yes. This has even happened in the Bronx.
Where is that?
There was a police station commission that John Ahern received 2 years ago, mm-hmm. and it had gone through the procedure of being approved by the Art Commission. The community board had looked at it and said it was fine. It went into place, and some people objected to it and
Why?
thought it was inappropriate for the neighborhood, and it came down in 5 days.
5 days?
5 days.
What was
after taking about 5 years to
What was controversial about it?
I think the depictions of the people in the mural, in the sculptures, were not the same as they had been in the murals earlier, and the neighborhood saw them as negative stereotypes. The image has always been based on people in the neighborhood. The castings are done directly from the people. Mm-hmm. And I think when things go in front of a police station, it's contextualized in a very different way than it is in a neighborhood or in a museum.
So what happens to them? It's 5 years of work, 5 days of being on public exhibit, and are they gone? Are they melted down? Or what
They're not melted down. The Department of Cultural Affairs right now is trying to sell those so that they can recoup the money for the bronze and commission a new work.
Where are they now?
PS1 in Long Island City.
Oh, yes.
They've been on view there for about 2 years.
Uh-huh.
The city of Phoenix has an interesting ruling that says that things can be deaccessioned. They can get rid of them from the public collection, but only after 5 years. They make their community live with them for a while and see if they can come to terms.
Of course, there's the famous story of the wall, that rusty old wall was
the Richard Serra piece.
Richard Serra. That was very controversial and eventually was taken down. And I know that hasn't melted down, but I don't know where it is at the moment. There aren't many places that you can put something like that. Storm King is a place where massive pieces can be on permanent display, but where else can you take something and remove it and still have it on public display?
Yeah. Another thing that's a little tricky in that regard is that most of these pieces are designed to be site-specific. The idea of just taking any artist and plunking them into a plaza is not something that people do much anymore. And so usually an artist has designed a particular piece with a site in mind, so that putting it in a different site really is also something of a problem as well.
I think what you're doing for us is opening our eyes to seeing things that are all about us that we may just walk by or drive by or see and not realize what has gone into creating it. And I think it'll help a great deal when it's explained. This gallery, which I think of as a museum, but I know you call a gallery, is it part of Lehman College? How does that work?
It is incorporated separately with its own board. It raises, by and large, most of its own fund. It gets a small amount of funding from the college. This exhibition is being supported with grants from the New York State Council on the Arts, from the NEA, from numerous foundations and corporations. So we're separate in that regard.
You've been there for several years, but the role of director is a new one for you.
Yes, I've only been director for a few months.
And being director, the buck stops here, I suppose, and you've got to make all the decisions and, I guess, raise all the money and get the grants.
Yeah.
How far ahead do you plan?
In order to get those grants, one usually plans an exhibition schedule at least 2 years ahead. And so we're always looking for new ideas, but and we also leave some space in the exhibition program to respond to things that might come up and warrant an immediate exhibit, so that you pace the funding but you're planning long term.
I'm always interested when I talk to museum directors on this program about what goes into it and how you determine what an exhibit's going to be. Where's the idea come from? Where did the idea for contemporary public art come from?
Well, in this instance, and I think each time the instance is a little bit different. I mean, it usually just strikes you when you're not thinking about it. You push to find a solution and come up with something that's going
bulb lights over.
Suit the audience, and really it is that bulb, and so I just wait for the bulb. This bulb went off because I had been involved in a panel in Hunts Point that was looking to place a work in the Hunts Point distribution, the food center down there, is getting a Percent for Art project that is not in place yet, but by the Southwest artist Luisa Manes. And these will be wonderful pieces, but I was on the selection panel for that work. And at the same time, the college was getting new Percent for Art projects because there's a new gym that's going in that will open later this winter there. And in this beautiful building that's designed by Raphael Vignoli, there'll be 5 artists. And so I was on that panel too, and I thought, well, I was working with Sally Webster, who has just put out a book on public art.
Yes, you mentioned her name before. She's participating in...
We're co-curating this.
Co-curating.
And...
who is she?
She teaches at Lehman and has done quite a bit of writing on the field of public art, and so was a natural collaborator for this exhibit. So between working and realizing there was a talented person that could work with us and that we had public art on the campus, I was expecting there to be maybe 5 or 10 projects throughout the Bronx, and there are over 35. So there's art going into the subways, there's art going into the schools. It's
bigger than you thought it would be.
Much bigger than I thought it would be. And we're still finding projects that are being funded.
The gallery itself, you have a great school program that goes on. It's one of the thrusts of what you do, isn't it?
It's a very significant piece of what we do. We have about 7,000 school children who come through every year, and we have programs for teachers on the graduate level after they're out teaching in the schools to teach them how to work with museum collections and to make that a part of the elementary school teachers' curriculum, because in the Bronx we've lost a lot of art teachers in the schools. So we try and provide programs for everybody.
And that's an important role that you play in introducing, in many cases, these children to art, which they've never experienced before. What's the reaction when you get kids in there for the first time?
Oh, well, they usually love it. We have some very talented docents who talk to them about the work, get their ideas on the gallery tour, but we always add to that a component where they go to the studio downstairs afterwards, and they got a chance to make a project that's based on what they've seen.
Hands-on involvement.
Hands-on, and sometimes they make prints, sometimes they make sculptures, sometimes they make drawings, but it's always based on the ideas they've just talked about upstairs. So it's a nice balance, and everyone seems to have a good time.
What are the hours that the gallery's open?
10 to 4.
Every day?
Tuesday through Saturday.
Tuesday through Saturday. And if people want more information about the tours, the lectures, the exhibit, and so on, what number can they call?
718-960-8732.
Let's repeat that.
718-960-8732.
And we'll put that on the screen in the closing credits so that people can write it down if they do want to call and find more information. I want to explore further with you the future at the gallery. You're going to tell us what your plans are after December 15th? What are you headed for?
Well, we have an exhibit coming up in the early spring, in February, that will look at the experience of Asian American artists. Another exhibit later in the spring will deal with art that's created at the turn of the century throughout the Bronx by the Rambush Company, which is they've designed decorative arts for churches, theaters, opera houses, and have done a number of buildings in the Bronx. Your
focus is on the Bronx. In somehow there is that stream that goes through. You don't just go off in another direction. It seems to me from this exhibit and the others that the Bronx figures in everything you do. Is that so, or does it just happen to be in this case?
It's an important factor. Last spring we had the work of Mayakovsky, who was the Russian poet and graphic designer. We have had many, many shows that are all different subjects and not necessarily connected to the Bronx.
Well, I just think it's been great talking to you today and finding all about the Lehman College Art Gallery, and thank you very much for coming.
Thank you for having me.
And I hope our people who are watching will take a look at public art and learn all about it. My guest today has been Susan Hoeltzel, who is the director of the Lehman College Art Gallery. I'm Norman Liss. The name of the program is The Way to Go. Until next week at the same time, enjoy yourself.